whether it takes 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, it is inevitable that we will hit those limits. We'll run out of resources, or the pollution will become so bad that it affects our human health and we start to feel the impact as human beings.
I think if we continue with the linear economy, we're, to use a technical term, totally screwed.
Is it too late? This is one I get asked often when I lecture at Cambridge University and other places, and sometimes I have to answer this way. If I look at the science, and if I look at the trends and the facts, it's very hard not to be pessimistic. It's very hard not to say that we're heading off the cliff at 100 miles an hour. But if I look at the speed and the scale of the changes that are happening, and I look at the people working on these problems, and I look at the breakthroughs in technology that we're seeing right now, it's very hard not to be optimistic. I began this journey of looking at the circular economy through my work in sustainability, but really through my realization after many years consulting to multinationals and businesses around the world on sustainability.
Today, materials are on the cusp of a revolution, where anything seems possible. Bionic limbs that can feel.
That was the closest thing to come to a human Terminator.
Self-repairing shoes.
Self-growing, self-reproducing even.
Mind-bending metals.
It's a bit like my parents' cat.
They can be utterly baffling.
It's like a magical world.
Or totally wondrous.
It was developed to catch stardust, so it's basically a poem. I mean, is there anything more poetic than something light to catch stardust?
And now, working with the basic building blocks of matter, scientists are blurring the lines between the living and the non-living.
You're actually making structures which nature doesn't make.
And transforming our world.
Farmer Chow Ching Chuan specializes in pears. He still uses his old toothbrush to get the pollen. Standing in line for the vibrator. The pollen harvest has been offered as a service in the city for some time now. At Farmer Chow's, everything is still handmade. The filaments are brushed and dried.
In the Kavakan archipelago, we see a landscape shaped by the last climate catastrophe experienced by our planet. The cooling of the climate that started around 120,000 years ago triggered the last ice age. The first sign of this in northern Europe was the glacier that formed in the Scandinavian mountains. When the glacier expanded, it began to move south. In the coldest phase of the Ice Age, around 20,000 years ago, the continental ice sheet literally flowed over Europe, finally extending all the way to northern Germany. The ice sheet was over 3 kilometers thick, with a weight so tremendous that the Earth's crust collapsed, forming an enormous dent about 1 kilometer deep. When the continental ice sheet retreated from Europe around 10,000 years ago, much more of the Finnish coast was underwater than it is today. As the Earth's crust started to rise again after the ice had left it, the shoreline started to move westwards. The Kvarken archipelago is where the deepest point of the dent was, and has only risen from the sea over the past 1,000 years. In other places, the upheaval has almost stopped, but in the Kvarken archipelago, it is still ongoing, generating about 100 hectares of new land in the area each year.